Imagine entering a courtroom so charged that even the sound of a pen hitting the floor could turn heads. That was the case when the Browns, the most well-known plural family from sister wives, entered the limelight for a courtroom battle that would leave millions of people speechless. Their fans, who had been watching them for more than a decade, believed they had witnessed everything: marriages crumbling, public brawls, family saga. But nobody was ready for this drama-filled trial. Seated at the center of it all was Kody Brown, the father who had once bragged about keeping 4 wives under one roof. He was well-dressed, but his eyes gave him away. They moved anxiously around the room, aware that today could be the day that his carefully built image came crashing down. And then there was Meri, the first wife. The one who had been with him from the start, who assisted in the creation of the family foundation before fame, cameras, and reality television. She remained quiet for much of the morning session, the look on her face unreadable. But when the judge finally allowed her to speak, Meri straightened. The court fell silent. Journalists leaned in. Even Kody squirmed uncomfortably in his seat. Meri looked at the man she had once loved, the father of her child, the husband she had sacrificed so much for, and with a voice strong enough to shake the walls, she said, "You've lied for years, Kody. And today, the truth comes out." The gasp that followed wasn't just from the audience in the room. It was from fans across the nation, glued to every breaking update. And what Meri would disclose in the following hour would have everyone wondering about everything they ever believed they understood about the Browns. The courthouse doors swung wide, and the mob that had been waiting outside poured in, hungry for even the briefest glance of the clan that once held America's fascination. Reporters lifted microphones high, cameras flashed repeatedly, and fans turned their necks behind the ropes that surrounded the courthouse steps. It wasn't any ordinary legal proceeding. This was a spectacle, a cacophony that promised revelation of years of whispers, rumors, and broken promises. Inside, the tension was no less charged. The courtroom was filled to capacity, each bench occupied by spectators, reporters, and nosy onlookers who had staked out their seats hours in advance. The tension was palpable, a living thing that seemed almost to buzz, humming with expectation. Courtrooms are generally environments of strict order, but this one was permeated with a whiff of drama that made it seem almost like a theater. Everyone here knew they were not merely watching a trial. They were going to see a family disintegrate before their eyes. Centered in this saga sat Kody Brown, the man whose name had become synonymous with the scandalous lives of plural marriage. Once, he was staged as a charming, confident patriarch who juggled the impossible feat of juggling 4 wives under one sprawling dome. But his confidence today was thin. He remained stiffly seated in his chair at the defendant's table, his arms clamped tightly over his chest like an armor. He nervously glanced around the court, not looking at the press gallery, not looking at the fans, but most of all, not looking at his wives. Kody's attorney leaned in close to him, whispering something meant to settle his nerves. Yet nothing was able to temper the tempest building within him. He knew that as soon as Meri, his first wife, stepped into the stand, his whole life would change. The man who had long enjoyed control over his family, his money, and his public persona, was now a man about to be revealed. The judge, whose reputation for piercing theatrics preceded her, came into the courtroom. "All rise," said the bailiff, and the room rose as a unit. The ringing of dozens of shoes on the tile floor sounded like thunder. The judge sat down, and the trial began in earnest. Opening arguments were presented, each side outlining their case with the skill of veteran players in an expensive game. But as the lawyers pontificated, the audience wasn't even looking at them. They were looking at Meri. She sat silently in her allocated seat, hands clasped primly in her lap, eyes fixed on the table in front of her. She appeared serene on the surface, almost too serene. But anyone who had watched her journey over the years would know that under that placid exterior lay a woman who had spent decades experiencing heartache, being neglected, and being silenced. Meri Brown had not known any other kind of scrutiny. She had been there at the start, the original wife who had been at Kody's side when cameras weren't rolling, before fame had made things so difficult. She'd stood by and watched 3 other women become part of their marriage, as her position in the family changed, as her relationship with Kody cooled further with the years. Sister Wives viewers had caught moments of her suffering, her loneliness, her frantic efforts to bring back what they once shared. But what none of them had ever really seen, until today, was what that pain had strengthened within her. The time had arrived when the judge spoke her name. Meri Brown. Please come on up. Silence descended on the courtroom. The scraping of the wooden chair against the floor, as she rose, seemed louder than any voice. She moved slowly, methodically, her heels in sharp metallic rhythm, as if ticking off the seconds to an explosion. Each step she took bore decades of history, years of toil, years of silence, years of marginalization. Kody edged uncomfortably, his jaw clenching as Meri moved toward the witness stand. He finally met her eyes, but not the warm glance of a husband, the hard, almost guarded look of a man who felt danger encroaching. Meri held up her hand, swore on oath, and sat down. She fiddled with the microphone, her fingers firm. There was no shaking, no indication of nervousness. Her calmness stunned even those who believed they understood her best. This wasn't the Meri who used to cry in confessional interviews, her voice shaking from the intensity of her feelings. This was a woman reborn in resolve, a woman prepared to come clean whatever the cost. The attorney's initial question was straightforward, procedural, designed to provide background. But before Meri could respond, the judge signaled for her to speak without restriction. This was her moment, and it was obvious the court and the world wanted to know what she had to say. She slanted forward, her gaze finally engaging Kody's, and her voice sliced the weighty silence with the sharpness of a knife. "You've lied for years, Kody," she said, her voice steady, powerful, unflinching. "And today, the truth comes out." The effect was instantaneous. A collective gasp rippled across the room. Journalists scribbled furiously, pens racing across paper. The audience leaned forward, hungry for every syllable. Even the judge, known for her stone-faced composure, tilted her head slightly, acknowledging the gravity of the moment. Kody winced, his mouth opening as if he wished to interrupt, but his attorney rested a hand on his arm, willing him to remain silent. For the first time in years, Kody was not guiding the story. The spotlight had turned. The stage was hers alone. She waited, allowing the full weight of her words to hang over the courtroom like a storm cloud. And then she went on, her voice rising ever so slightly, enough to ensure that not one person in the room could possibly miss what she had to say. "For far too long you've portrayed me as the issue," she stated. "Every word measured, calculated. You've informed the world that I was remote, that I had distanced myself. But the world never knew about the reality. The reality surrounding the decisions you made in the privacy of your own home, the things you hid, and the family you tainted." The courtroom was still, but it wasn't the stillness of boredom or indifference. It was the stillness of a crowd completely transfixed, hanging on the words. Even those who had attended with their doubts, thinking that this could be nothing more than a family feud acted out in the open, could sense it. Something true, something dynamic, was being played out before their eyes. For Kody, this was the start of a nightmare. For Meri, it was the start of freedom. She leaned forward in her chair, her confidence increasing with each word. This wasn't about revealing secrets. It was about taking back her voice, after decades of being muted, about telling the world she was more than just the first wife relegated to the background. All the cameras in the courtroom were on her as she moved, as she celebrated in real time. The Meri Brown that had appeared to be broken and alone was no more. Standing before them was a woman who had discovered her strength, who had decided this was the moment to move into the light. And when she started to tell the tale that would destroy Kody's perfectly built reputation, the world waited with bated breath, because everybody knew that what was next would be all change. To really get the effect of Meri's testimony, we have to go back. When Sister Wives originally aired, it was branded as revolutionary television, a glimpse into the lives of plural marriage. Kody presented himself as a man of faith, a polygamous patriarch, with many children, navigating the complications of loving 4 wives and raising over a dozen kids. He sold it as love, unity, and faith, beating out society's stigma. But where fans witnessed smiles, shared meals, and family rituals on film, Meri witnessed something else. Behind the scenes, the family life wasn't complicated. It was breaking. Kody treated the wives like favorites, shifting his focus based on which wife was pleasing him at the moment. Money matters were kept in the dark. Discussions were coached, and vows were broken. Meri, having sacrificed her dream of a traditional monogamous marriage to accommodate Kody's spiritual vision, felt more and more marginalized. Initially, she rationalized it. She justified in her mind that she needed to make the sacrifice for the family's greater good. But gradually the sacrifice was replaced by silence, and silence gave way to resentment. And meanwhile, Kody's public persona gained strength. He posed for photos, acted like the struggling but devoted husband, and convinced viewers that Meri was the aloof one, the wife who could no longer commit wholeheartedly anymore. That's why her courtroom appearance was so incendiary. For years Kody dictated the terms. But now, Meri was ready to redo it with the truth. When Sister Wives first debuted, the world met a family unlike any that could be seen on mainstream television. The Browns, headed by the seemingly confident and charming Kody, seemed to live a life most would never dream of. A life where one man juggled the love, loyalty, and duty of several wives under one roof. The idea stunned some, fascinated others, and attracted millions of viewers who wished to look in on the existence of contemporary polygamy. During those early years, Kody came across as a man of religion and integrity, a man willing to be mocked in order to live by his principles. His wives were there to support him, each flashing a smile for the cameras, each eager to explain how they managed to make the unconventional arrangement work. At least on the surface, it seemed daring, perhaps even inspirational, a family united against societal disapproval. But behind smiles like those were fractures no television crew could fully illuminate. For Meri, the cracks began early. She was first, the foundation, the one who wed Kody, when he was a young man with big dreams and even greater confidence. She thought she was creating something special, something spiritual, something fated. When the concept of plural marriage was presented, she embraced it with faith, believing that her sacrifice of exclusivity would be repaid with more profound ties of love and eternal family cohesion. But the dream did not translate to reality. With every new wife, her position seemed to dwindle. What was once private and special between her and Kody became stretched out, divided, and ultimately neglected. As Kody was occupied with bringing in new wives and new babies, Meri sat on the sidelines, her position diminishing to become nothing more than an afterthought. However, when the cameras rolled, she smiled. She performed her role. She allowed the world to witness what they wanted to witness. A wife devoted to her husband, a woman who would accept the intricacies of plural marriage for the religion and family's sake. The reality was, though, the perfect family put forth on Sister Wives was skillfully staged fiction. As the seasons progressed, the fans started to see the tension. They noticed the look Kody gave some wives differently, noticed the softening in his tone with one and the bristling at the other. They noticed the slight changes in body posture, the fake smiles, the periods of silence where there should have been. Social media exploded with rumors. Who was Kody's favorite? Who was he shoving aside? For Meri, the solution was agonizingly obvious. She was the one disappearing from Kody's world. Their marriage, the focal point of the Brown family saga, grew frigid and distant. On TV, Kody confessed he couldn't bond with her, that he doubted their future. For millions of viewers, these were bombshell admissions. To Meri, however, they were just reconfirmations of what she already lived day by day. And still, Kody went on playing his role as the confused husband, the husband who was saddled with the responsibility of keeping it all together. He portrayed himself as the victim of circumstance, a person doing his best while other people refused to meet him halfway. To observers, it seemed that Meri had distanced herself, that she had shut off her heart, that she was the one making things hard. But what the cameras didn't capture were the clandestine decisions behind the scenes. Whereas filming staged a picture of unity, Meri gradually learned that Kody had been making moves in secret without informing her. Financial talks were done in hush. Land and property issues were hashed out in private, with other wives, excluding Meri. Promises were made selectively, and she was no longer among the recipients. Each revelation chipped away at the illusion she had helped build. The man who once promised her eternal loyalty now treated her like an obstacle. And worse, the narrative he allowed the world to believe was that she was the problem. Imagine playing the distant, unloving wife when in fact your husband had withdrawn from you long before you ever had. Imagine having to smile on camera, knowing that the story that was being told wasn't just inaccurate, it was a fabrication. That was Meri's reality. The other wives did see it too. Christine witnessed how Meri was shoved to the side, although sometimes she also fought with her. Janelle attempted to stay neutral, stressing her autonomy. Robin, who was the youngest wife, appeared to get the lion's share of attention from Kody, and this drove him further apart from Meri. Fans argued back and forth. Some criticized Meri for being aloof. Others criticized Kody for favoritism. But nobody could piece together the whole picture. Only Meri knew the truth about what was going on behind the closed doors, the truth about how her marriage had been torn apart piece by piece, while the cameras captured only bits and pieces. And for years, she remained quiet. She carried the shame of public opinion, held the isolation of being discarded, and felt the pain of seeing Kody redefine the narrative of their marriage on national television. But silence, as it also does, accumulated pressure. And before long, that pressure had to be released. In the courtroom, when Meri finally rose to testify, her words held the weight of all those years of silence. This wasn't mere testimony. This was a reckoning. She was ripping away the veil of a perfect family and revealing to the world what had been hiding behind it. The audience that had previously sympathized with Kody's side of the story was on the verge of hearing another that revealed him not as the wronged husband, but as a man who manipulated perceptions to defend himself. It wasn't about polygamy, or TV, or celebrity anymore. It was about reality. About silent pain of a woman whose devotion had been returned as betrayal. About the manner in which Kody created a family to be a show and abandoned his first wife to be the bad guy. The courtroom fell silent in awe as Meri started to untangle the tale that had been hidden for years. The facade was crumbling, and all could see it. And just as she was about to release the contents of Kody's secret life, the whole world moved in closer, waiting for the revelation that would change them forever about the Browns. As Meri started speaking, she did not hold anything back. Her language was tart, her tone consistent, as though she had been waiting for these years to make their statement. She disclosed that even before cameras began rolling, Kody had been secretly cutting deals, economic arrangements that jeopardized their house and security. She talked about how he made offers in discussions wherein he would assure some wives security and leave others on their own. And worst of all, she talked about private sessions with attorneys wherein Kody had set himself up for divorce, years before he ever brought it up publicly. He painted me as the problem, Meri informed the court, never looking away from Kody. But the reality is, he was plotting his escape all along. He was never truthful to me, to the other wives, or to our children. The court murmured with whispers. Some shook heads in disbelief. Others scribbled notes, eager to capture every statement for the headlines. And yet, Meri continued. You said to the world you put your family first. She went on, her voice growing louder. But the truth? You put your ego first. And now the truth is here. No matter if you want it to be or not. The proof she had in her defense supported her. Emails, spreadsheets, papers that showed a vastly different side of the man America believed they knew. It was no longer Meri's testimony against Kody's. It was Meri's truth against Kody's empire of lies. The courtroom had already been buzzing after Meri's opening words. But what came next pushed the atmosphere from tense curiosity into absolute shock. Everyone leaned forward, eyes fixed on the woman who had once been painted as the most silent and sidelined of the wives. She wasn't silent now. Meri fiddled with the microphone, never once looking away from Kody. For years people had painted her as cold, aloof, even intimidating. Yet here she was, now speaking out, her voice ringing clear, cutting and unwavering. It was the voice of a truth long buried, finally fighting its way into the light. Kody, she declared sternly, you have constructed your reputation on deception. You led the world to believe that you were giving up for your family, but you gave up your family for yourself. The words struck like a thunderclap. The crowd gasped, reporters wrote furiously, and even the judge raised an eyebrow, shocked. Kody's face contorted, his jaw clenching. But Meri didn't hold back. She had kept quiet for too long. Meri started stripping away the layers of manipulation. She exposed how many months earlier, before separation talk even went public, Kody had been privately meeting with attorneys. He wanted us to think he was blindsided, that the family's collapse happened suddenly, Meri clarified, her eyes snapping. But those meetings, years ago, before any of us knew what he was up to. Gasps filled the courtroom once again. The possibility that Kody had been crafting an exit strategy while appearing on camera as a struggling but devoted husband was nearly too much for people to bear. And it wasn't all official meetings. Meri went on. He negotiated business deals in secret. Land, real estate, investments. He gave guarantees to some wives and omitted others. I was left out. I was never consulted. I was simply deleted from the choices that created the destiny of this family. She dug into a folder her attorney had put in front of her, pushing papers across the table for the judge to read. Copies of contracts, emails, and account statements. Every sheet of paper was a knife, piercing Kody's artfully created public persona. The judge glanced through the pages, face serene but alert. The balance of evidence was overwhelming. But Meri wasn't done. Her evidence probed deeper, not only into finances and legal preparation, but into emotional betrayals that tore the family asunder. You stood in front of cameras, she stated, voice cracking for the first time, and said to the world that you loved us all, that you were being fair. But out of the sight of those cameras, you told some wives what they wanted to hear, and gave the rest of us nothing. You vowed to them that you would be loyal while telling me that I was not worth fighting for. A murmur swept through the courtroom. They had all witnessed instances of favoritism on the show, particularly towards Robyn, but having it confirmed within this environment added a different weight to it. Meri's expression hardened once more, determination taking hold. You didn't just tear us apart, Kody, you tore us apart, and then blamed me for the fall. Kody shifted in his seat, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear, but his expression gave him away. He was rattled. For the first time in years, Meri held the power, and he couldn't silence her. Then came perhaps the most heartbreaking part of her testimony. Meri's voice softened, but her words struck harder than ever. You said one thing to our children, and something else to us. You promised things you never delivered. You wanted them to think that I was the one leaving, that I didn't care about them. But the reality is, you left a lot earlier than I ever did. You emotionally left me, and you left them as well. The courtroom fell absolutely silent. Even the scratching of pens ceased for a second. The impact of her words lingered in the air like a boulder. Meri breathed, her eyes shining but firm. Do you know the feeling of watching your child believe a lie about you? Of seeing them think you gave up on their father, while their father had given up on you first? That is the truth Kody never allowed anyone to hear. And that's why I'm speaking today. A woman in the audience gasped, covering her mouth. Journalists nodded their heads, already aware this would top headlines. As Meri went on, she put the story together like a puzzle, every new development clicking into place just as fans had imagined for years. She spoke of the loneliness, the bias, the clandestine decisions. She painted a portrait of a man who lived on control, on building his reputation on selective facts, and on allowing his first wife to bear the brunt of troubles he had caused. The perfect family that America had been sold was an illusion. You didn't lose your marriages, Meri declared at last, her voice sharp, her hand slapping against the stand for emphasis. You lost the truth, and now the world deserves to know who you truly are. The words reverberated through the courtroom, ricocheting off the walls like a verdict prior to the verdict. The crowd whispered once more, not able to stifle their response. Even the judge allowed the silence to linger, giving space for the power of Meri's words to settle. Just when it seemed she had said all she could, Meri's lawyer introduced more evidence, emails and text messages that aligned perfectly with her claims. In them, Kody discussed finances with one wife while excluding another. In others, he openly questioned whether Meri had any value left in the family dynamic. The courtroom hummed louder than ever before. These were no longer mere accusations. They were backed by paper trails, evidence that discredited Kody's long-held account. Kody's attorney protested, attempted to brush the papers aside as taken out of context. But it was too late. The evidence was out. The facade was broken. Meri ended her testimony in a quietness that amazed even her defenders. She leaned back ever so slightly after almost an hour of disclosures, her eyes remaining fixed on Kody's. "For years I thought silence was strength," she whispered. "I thought holding on was faith. But now I know the truth. Strength is speaking. Faith is rising up when no one anticipates you. And that's why I'm here. To tell the truth you never wanted told." The crowd was quiet. Reporters shared wide-eyed glances. Social media outside the courthouse already was exploding with headlines and hashtags. And Kody, he sat rigid, his fists curled on the table, his face a mask of rage and humiliation. He had entered the courtroom expecting to defend his reputation, but now, in front of the world, his kingdom of illusions was collapsing. What Meri had said was more than a testimony. It was a declaration, a reckoning. A truth so heavy that even Kody couldn't dodge it. And the world, observing closely, knew that this was just the start. If Meri's testimony was a match, Kody's response was a wildfire. He slammed his hands on the table, his voice booming through the courtroom. "This is revenge," he shouted. "She's bitter, she's angry, and now she's twisting everything to destroy me." The judge promptly asked for order, but Kody's rage did not subside. He blamed Meri for lying, for making up stories, for being jealous of his other relationships. But the more he struggled, the more desperate he seemed. And then came the worst blow for Kody, because Meri wasn't alone. Christine, another wife who had already walked away, submitted supporting statements. Janelle's records were also entered into evidence, painting a picture that matched Meri's claims. Suddenly Kody wasn't just battling one testimony. He was facing a mountain of proof from the very women who once stood beside him. The audience could feel the walls closing in on him. His lawyers tried to pivot, but the narrative was slipping through their fingers. Kody had spent years controlling his image, but in that courtroom, he couldn't control Meri's truth. The silence that followed Meri's testimony was deafening. The courtroom air was thick with tension, as if every person present was holding their breath. Newspaper reporters' pens hovered over paper, cameras zoomed in closer still, and all eyes fixed on one man, Kody Brown. Years viewers had watched him on TV emit confidence, charm and control. But here, in the harsh glare of the courtroom fluorescent lights, his mask was shattering. His knuckles turned white as he clenched the table, his lips pursed tightly together, shaking as if words trapped inside him struggled to burst forth. And then they did. Kody pounded his fists on the desk, the crash echoing like a shot. "This is outrageous," he bellowed, his voice ricocheting off the walls. The courtroom exploded in stunned gasps. Even the judge's gavel couldn't instantly bring the room back into order. Kody jumped up quickly, his attorney holding on to his sleeve in a frantic effort to hold him back. But Kody was out of control. His chest heaved and fell in quick breaths as he aimed a trembling finger straight at Meri. "You're distorting everything. You're turning me into a monster when you know the truth is different." His voice boomed around the room, tangled with rage, desperation, and an undercurrent of panic. Meri? She didn't blink. She sat frozen, her eyes fixed on him, her dignity a shield against the tempest, sweeping through the courtroom. "You speak of lies," Kody snapped. "What about your lies, Meri? What about the decisions you made that nearly destroyed this family?" The room burst into gasps once more. The crowd shifted uneasily, whispers flying through the gallery like fire. Kody pulled no punches. He was railing, intent on turning the tables and shining the spotlight back on Meri. He leaned in close, speaking in a venomous whisper. "Do you want me to remind people about your cybersex scandal? About the so-called catfishing scandal? You want to stand here and vilify me? But you're not innocent either." The courtroom broke into murmurs. The infamous scandal had been public knowledge for years. But hearing it thrown in Meri's face here, under oath, hit differently. It wasn't just gossip now. It was a weapon, wielded by a husband, desperate to reclaim control of a narrative, slipping from his grasp. "You betrayed this family first," Kody bellowed, his face flushed with fury. "You humiliated me. You humiliated us all. And you still have the nerve to stand here like a saint? Mary's eyes sparkled, but she kept her cool. Her attorney objected, requesting the judge to rule the remarks irrelevant. The gavel came down, but the harm had already been inflicted. With the gavel ringing out, Kody attempted to regain his composure, but his rage was too great. His voice trembled between rage and pleading. I gave all to this family. Everything. I gave up my ambitions, my time, my independence. And what did I have? Criticism all the time. Betrayal. No one notices how hard I worked to keep this family together when they were destroying it behind my back. He was unraveling in front of everyone's eyes. What had been confidence now appeared to be desperation. His movements were jerky, his face reddened, sweat starting to form on his forehead. Reporters wrote frantically, taking down every word. This was no longer merely testimony. It was theater, the sort of courtroom drama that would make headlines for weeks on end. But Kody didn't stop with Meri. His anger erupted in all directions. And it wasn't just you, Meri. He spat, striding up and down, over the judge's order for calm. Christine deceived me too. She stormed out like I was nothing. After all I had created. Janelle? She took the side of Christine, rather than standing by her husband. And even Robin. Yes, Robin. The favorite everyone imagines I hold in some esteem. You all turned against me in the end. You all made me the bad guy. The gallery exploded. Gasp, whispers, even a shocked laughter filled the air. Never before had Kody spoken publicly about the cracks in relationships with all the wives. Not like this. Not in public. Not with this raw, blistering anger. His voice cracked as he went on. Do you have any idea what it's like to give your life to people who want to only use you? To be called selfish when I was the only one keeping everything intact? His tone was cutting, but beneath the rage was something else. Fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of the truth being distorted outside of him. Fear of the carefully constructed image shattering. Finally, the patience of the judge wore thin. The gavel cracked 3 times. The sharp reports demanding quiet. Mr. Brown, the judge stated firmly. This court will not devolve into anarchy. Sit down or I will find you in contempt. The order pierced Kody's anger. Gasping for air, he glared at the judge, then again at Meri. His chest rose and fell, and for an instant it appeared he would blow again. But with reluctance, pulled back by his attorney, Kody sat down. Seated, still his rage did not abate. He seethed in anger, shaking his head, gripping his fists. The courtroom itself, however, had already witnessed what it needed to. The mask of control was off. Kody Brown wasn't the cool, rational patriarch that he'd long presented himself as. He was furious. He was cornered, and he was disintegrating. Also throughout it all, Meri never once lost her voice. She never lashed back, never attempted to meet his anger with anger. Her silence, her serenity, became its own sort of weapon. The contradiction was glaring. Kody, red-faced and trembling, hollering accusations like fire, and Meri, unflinching, calm, resolute. It presented a picture to the audience clearer than any testimony. Whom did the audience find more believable? The woman quietly tabulating facts, or the man ranting and raving in anger, rummaging out skeletons into the light in a last-ditch effort to salvage his own hide? Journalists already had an idea of how they'd spin it. Twitter was probably lighting up with thumbnails and hashtags #Kody MELTDOWN, #Meri speaks truth, #sister wives courtroom drama. Kody believed his rage would reveal Meri. He believed by reminding everyone of her sins, he could change the story. But it didn't work that way. His tantrum only served to emphasize the exact truths Meri had spoken. He was not the unruffled leader. He was not the benevolent father figure. He was a desperate man clinging to his ego, willing to shame his ex-wife in a court of law just to regain a semblance of control. And the louder he spoke, the further he lost the audience. As the class wound down, Kody couldn't help but have one last outburst. Half out of his chair, his voice shaking, he bellowed, "You'll be sorry, Meri. You're ruining everything we created. Everything we sacrificed as a couple. You're tossing it all in the trash." The courtroom froze. Meri looked at him with a calm, almost pitying expression. Her reply was simple, but it cut deeper than anything he had said. "No, Kody," she said softly, her voice steady enough for everyone to hear. "You destroyed it a long time ago. I'm just telling the truth." The courtroom broke out once more. Gasps, whispers, and even a burst of applause, swiftly stifled by the bailiffs. Kody's face fell, his rage meeting humiliation. The judge banged the gavel to dismiss the session for the day. But harm had been done. Kody's explosive outburst had given the world a front-row seat to his unraveling. And if Meri's testimony had cracked the foundation of his image, his own meltdown had brought the walls crashing down. By the time the trial reached its conclusion, the decision wasn't so much about legal papers or agreements. It was about reputation. It was about legacy. And it was about the dissolving of a well-crafted illusion. Meri emerged from the courthouse head held high. She made no long speeches to the media. She didn't have to. Her testimony had done it all. For the first time in many years, fans recognized her not as the quiet, benched wife, but as a woman who took back her power in the most public manner. Kody did leave though in silence. With lawyers on either side of him, his face pinched in anger and humiliation. He had gone into that courtroom, expecting to defend himself. He left vulnerable. The man who had boasted of being the head of his family was now alone, his truth shattered to the rest of the world. Social media erupted. Fans argued endlessly. Was this justice? Or was it tragedy? Some hailed Meri as a hero for finally speaking out. Others wondered why it would affect the rest of the family. But no one could dispute it. The Browns would never be the same again. The courtroom was abuzz like a hornet's nest, following Kody's breakdown. People murmured in hushed tones. Reporters leaned over each other to get quotes confirmed. And cameras clicked continually, as Kody stormed back into his seat, his face red with anger. But in the midst of it all, there was one indisputable fact. The room was no longer his. And now, with the testimonies finished and the evidence exposed, the burden of judgment hung suspended like a storm about to burst. The judge's stern tone called the room to order. "Silence in the court," he commanded. His gavel striking once more, the murmurs ceased, and the world held its breath. Both legal teams had one last chance to make their case. Meri's attorney stood tall, voice steady, letting the evidence speak for itself. This case is not about petty disagreements. It is about truth. For years the public has been fed a carefully curated version of events, but the records, the depositions, the very actions we saw in this court establish that Mr. Brown deliberately deceived not just his family, but the world. Meri did not seek revenge when she came here. She came here for truth, and the truth has spoken louder than any defense could muzzle. And then the lawyer for Kody arrived. Its voice was sharp and defensive. Mr. Brown has been unfairly characterized as a manipulator, when in fact he has been a man trapped by impossible circumstances. A man attempting to head an unorthodox family unit, which few could ever hope to comprehend. The collapse of that family was foreordained, not due to deception, but due to human fallibility. To assign guilt to one man alone is unfair. The words landed with little force. Compared to Meri's quiet strength and the evidence she had produced, the defense sounded hollow, like a house built on sand. The judge shuffled papers, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the only sound was the scratch of his pen. Then he looked up, his gaze moving between Meri and Kody. "This court has seen a remarkable spectacle," he started. His tone had authority, measured and unhurried. "It is unusual for domestic family issues to reach this public level, and here we are. What I have heard these past days reveals not only a marriage in shambles, but a family dynasty founded on contradictions, confidentiality, and deception." The crowd leaned forward. Kody gritted his jaw. Meri remained still, biding her time. The judge went on. "Meri Brown has presented strong evidence of emotional and financial manipulation. She has presented this court with evidence of clandestine dealings, favoritism, and abandonment. Mr. Brown's own tantrum yesterday did not improve his credibility. It exposed a temperament poorly adapted to the role he claims to have exercised with fairness and integrity." Kody's attorney attempted to interrupt, but the judge held up a hand for silence. My ruling is this. Meri Brown has been able to prove a pattern of dishonesty and unequal treatment. This court finds her testimony to be credible and her evidence to be formidable. Her claims are thus rendered valid. Gasps echoed throughout the room. The pen of a journalist fell to the ground. Kody's head jerked back in shock. Meri let her eyes shut for a second, sighing as if 1,000 pounds of weight had been removed from her shoulders. The decision fell like an earthquake. Kody leapt to his feet, his face flushing with indignation. This is a farce. A total farce, he shouted, his finger directed at the judge. You have no idea what I sacrificed. You have no idea what I gave up for these self-centered women. The judge slammed the gavel angrily. Mr. Brown, sit down, or you will be escorted out of this courtroom at once. But Kody was not hearing. He had spun around towards the gallery, cursing at journalists. Write the truth. Don't let her spin everything. She's not innocent. None of them are innocent. His cry broke, his desperation seeping into every word. Security started to approach him, and Kody's attorney pulled at his arm, begging him to desist. But the damage was done. His rage only served to emphasize the verdict's conclusion. Meri, on the other hand, stayed motionless. She didn't smirk, didn't gloat. She just looked at him, her face impassive but peaceful. For the first time in decades, she didn't need to struggle to have him notice her. She didn't need to plead for his notice. The truth had finally been heard on her behalf. Outside the courthouse, the atmosphere was charged. Cameras popped, microphones pushed toward reporters, and hordes of fans and critics alike flooded the steps. Hashtags broke out online in seconds. #Meri wins truth. Kody exposed. #Sister Wives trial. Videos of Kody's courtroom outburst broke the internet within minutes. Side-by-side comparisons popped up online. Meri sitting calm face-to-face with Kody red-faced and bellowing. Comment threads full of thoughts. Finally justice for Meri. A fan posted. Kody just blew his own case with that meltdown. One of them commented. This is the beginning of the end for the Sister Wives empire. A reporter tweeted. Fans had been speculating about favoritism, manipulation and behind-the-scenes secrets for years. Now they had the affirmation from the ultimate level, the courtroom itself. The ruling destroyed Kody's reputation. The supposed confident patriarch was now the face of collapse. His breakdown clips ran continuously on television talk shows and late-night entertainment shows. News anchors analyzed each word, each movement, each piece of the trial. Financially, the effect was devastating. Deals, sponsorships, and potential future projects attached to his name started to fall apart. The public trust was lost, and networks feared the backlash of remaining attached to a man now legendary in scandal. But the hardest hit was probably personal. For decades, Kody had been the hub of a vast family cosmos. But now that cosmos had collapsed, and he was standing in the rubble, alone. For Meri, the aftermath was the reverse. She left the courthouse, her head held high, not as a victim but a survivor. She had reporters yelling questions, but she said only one plain sentence, and drove away in her car. Those 4 words echoed everywhere. They appeared in headlines, in fan posts, in countless reaction videos online. They became a rallying cry, not just for Sister Wives fans, but for anyone who had ever felt silenced in a relationship. Meri's story wasn't just about exposing Kody, it was about reclaiming her voice. For years she had been edited on TV as quiet, marginalized, almost invisible. But in the courtroom she had shown the world the strength that had been hidden all along. The verdict of the trial didn't only conclude a marriage, but also an era. The Sister Wives show, once celebrated for its innovation, was now irreparably tainted by what was learned in the courtroom. What started as a program of religion and family, concluded as a story of secrets and betrayal. For the fans it was an unhappy taste. They had poured years of their lives into the Browns, buying into the dream of love, harmony and self-sacrifice. But the trial pierced the illusion, leaving only brutal realities. As one commentator quipped on the national airwaves, the courtroom gave us the finale that reality TV never could. Back in the courthouse, as the crowd dissipated and cameras stowed away, Meri sat quietly beside her attorney. She did not celebrate. She did not gloat. Rather, she whispered to herself, "It's finally over." Kody, in another corner of the room, sat huddled, head in his hands. For the first time, there was no crowd to charm, no wives to command, no cameras to distill his words. Only silence. The former mighty patriarch now was a man laid bare, his kingdom of control in ruins at the hands of the very truth he had worked so desperately to keep hidden. And as Meri walked outside into the sun, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She hadn't survived Kody Brown. She had emerged victorious. The truth wasn't just spoken, it was heard. And the world would never forget. Ultimately, this wasn't about one courtroom fight. It was about decades of silence, shattering into sound. It was about a woman finding her voice against the man who attempted to dictate the story. And it was about a truth that wouldn't remain buried. Kody Brown had made his reputation on the concept of family harmony. But Meri, with one explosive piece of testimony, destroyed the facade and exposed what was truly lurking beneath. And that's the startling reality. Occasionally, the greatest wars aren't waged in private residences or behind closed doors. Occasionally, they're waged in the blinding lights of a courtroom, in front of the entire world. And for the Browns, the consequences of this reality are only just beginning.